Thanks so much for joining us today. Chris and I are really excited because we have a guest that we've been listening to, reading reports from for quite a long time. I'm pleased to welcome James Cook. James is the head of retail research for JLL and hosts the podcast Where We Buy. James, we're pretty excited to have you. How are you doing today?
Hey, hello, Ann and Chris. I'm happy to be here. I am an Omni Talk fan. So it's kind of like, whatever, I don't know, when the DC and Marvel characters get together in one comic book. I think this is awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love that analogy. That's great.
I know. That's
Which
perfect.
side are you?
Oh, DC. I'm pretty dark.
Are you? All right. Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
Well,
I'm probably more juvenile. So yeah, we'll go.
That makes sense.
We'll go the other side on the Marvel side. So that makes sense. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, James, we really wanted to have you on the show today because so much of our work has intersected with the work that you are researching at JLL, just around what's happening with retail real estate, the retail industry in general. And so we wanted to have you on the show to kind of give us an update on where you're seeing things head, as we kind of have a few months in with COVID and our understanding how things are kind of changing from our side and the retail research side, and then what you're seeing in terms of how the real estate side of it is really evolving and changing as a result. And recently we came across a report where you identify some of the kind of key themes that you've been seeing recently. One of those being that, the obvious mass merchant traffic, grocery retail has increased significantly because of COVID. But can you give us a little bit more around some of the trends that you're seeing there, or if there's particular players that you're seeing really see results from this, or what's been going on in your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we watch shopper traffic really closely. We work with a vendor that provides us with anonymized mobile phone data. So you can really see where the traffic is going. And we look at like macro, and you can zoom in and look at particular stores. So at first, way back when, the lockdown first happened, we saw a huge spike in grocery stores, people just going to stock up. I know I was doing it. And since then that has tapered off.
Okay.
And for a while, what the trend was, is it was maybe 10 to 15% below normal. But every time people went, they were spending more money. So they were going less, but spending more. And this is specifically at grocery stores. And then also like superstores like your Targets and Walmarts and stuff like that. Now the trend is kind of back to normal. If you look at the numbers now for those kinds of stores, for grocery stores, traffic is about the same as it was a year ago. That doesn't mean life isn't back to normal. That doesn't mean life's back to normal, but that specific sector. Now, when you look at superstores like discount, like the Targets and Walmarts, traffic there might be down up to 10%. But again, people are still spending the same or more. They're just going less. And then when you look at shopping centers, that's where the real drop-offs are. Like if you look at enclosed malls, significantly less traffic. It seems like a lot of people are just avoiding them either for economic reasons, where the mall's a place where you're going to go to spend when you got some extra money, or for health reasons because it's enclosed. Traffic hasn't dropped off nearly as much in open air centers. And part of that is because people feel safer in open air centers. But part of it too is that open air centers tend to have those daily needs tenants that are still more popular right now. And then the craziest one that nobody saw coming is home improvement. I want to say at one point it was a good 20%. Foot traffic was 20% higher than it was the year before over the summer. It's still the highest increase year over year of all of the kind of store types. It's tapered off a little bit, but for whatever reason, nobody went on vacation and everybody decided to do fix-its and little projects around the house, myself included.
Mm-hmm. So let me play that back. So just so I make sure I caught it all too. So home improvement, you're seeing big traffic increases there, still seeing spending increases from what you're able to tell in terms of the amount they're spending per basket as they're making a trip. Mass, Walmart's, Targets of the world, same type of story. Grocery, we were seeing that, but now it's started to level off. Question for you, are we still seeing the basket increases even though the traffic has been leveling off to grocery stores? Where's that currently sitting from your estimation?
So as far as we can tell, and I don't have as much insight into that, I don't have a vendor that I look at for data, so it's more anecdotal.
Sure.
But what we're hearing from tenants in the shopping centers that we manage is basket sizes are higher than they were before. It's just less frequent.
You would think so. And the reason I was asking that too is because I think there's an interesting dichotomy there too when you start talking about, as you did, the indoor shopping centers where we haven't seen people come back there. It's interesting that traffic patterns are consistent with last year in grocery, but yet something is still keeping people out of enclosed shopping centers, even though grocery stores are technically enclosed. And do you think that's more the discretionary impact? Do you think it's a fear of COVID? Do you think it's both? I'm curious, like, how do you weight that, whether it's anecdotally or just even based on your experience or what information you do have that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a two-pronged attack. The one prong is the recessionary mindset. We saw this in the last recession. When people, there's people who are making less money or lost their job. Obviously, they're going to spend less money on especially the kinds of things you get at the mall, which are often discretionary spend. And then for folks who still have their job, I mean, it's just, when everybody else around you is spending less, you spend less. There's that. There's the safety component. I just feel safer in open air. I have to go to grocery, but I'm going to go a little bit less now. And then the third component, which is a real knock to the malls, is back to school was really modified this year.
Right.
a
Especially
lot
on the
of
apparel side.
Yeah. And as apparel, what is the biggest percentage of tenants at an enclosed mall? Department stores and apparel. We did a back to school consumer survey. Oddly, back to school spending overall was higher this year because people bought computers and tablets for their kids who were remote learning.
Right. All the electronics, right.
James, you said something there that I want to ask and dive a little bit deeper into. Of most of the enclosed malls, we're talking about department stores and apparel stores for the most part. As you're kind of looking at the landscape, you at JLL are looking at who potential tenants might be. You're kind of or if someone was listening to this podcast and they're like, who do I go after? Who are those kind of star tenants that we think can survive COVID, can keep foot traffic up? Can, if I do have a mall and some of those apparel brands are not doing it so hot and I'm looking to bring in other services or other elements into my mall store, who are the types of people that or I should say types of retailers that you think are set up to kind of succeed or last and weather this storm?
Yeah, there's this long overdue reimagining of the mall. I mean, 100%. And you guys, I'm sure, have been thinking about this for years. You guys are out of Minneapolis, right? That's like the home of the mall.
Yeah, started it all. Yeah.
Yeah.
First indoor shopping mall.
Yeah. So many things that can happen with the mall. Less of a reliance on a department store anchor. Obviously, it's not the end of a department store. We have so many of them. And the internet, to a certain extent, online retail has taken over the need for some of the things the department store did. A lot of consumers now prefer the smaller boutiques and such to get your shoes, your apparel, the kinds of things that you'd get at a department store. So that component, we need fewer of those department store anchors. And so the question is, what do you do with that space? A lot of different uses. We were looking at a lot of it, food and entertainment. That's all on kind of temporary hold because of COVID.
Right.
My take is that that comes back with a vengeance in a year or two. I mean, COVID is not a 10-year deal. COVID is a year or two, right? So after that's taken care of, I'm going to be going out to eat like in every sit down restaurant in town. And I think everybody else is too. So I think there's an opportunity there. And we do see, I'm seeing people still developing food halls right now. But you'd think this is a crazy time to do it. But by the time you get it together and set up, it's either going to be this summer or next summer that it's going to come back. So there's some real opportunity there. Entertainment, food. So those are good. Obviously a lot of talk about, can we do industrial uses in retail? Logistically, there's a lot of issues with that. There's zoning. So a lot of people who live next to a mall don't want that mall to have any kind of 18-wheelers coming in and out, or delivery vans, or, excess of, any non-retail uses. The municipalities don't like it as much because you get less taxes. You lose those sales taxes. And then the buildings themselves aren't really configured. The only thing they're really configured for as is would be like, small scale last mile fulfillment, like doing the kinds of things that, Best Buy is now doing from their store, and other retailers are doing kind of that last mile fulfillment and click and collect. So, I mean, other uses that I'm excited about are kind of harken back to like that old Southdale model of, put a grocery store in there, barber shop, butcher, a lot more hardware store, like kind of the daily needs things, and turned it into a place that people are going to come to a couple times a week instead of once a month.
The jobs to be done kind of mindset in terms of what we can all do. Is that possible to do in your mind, given just, generally speaking, how big a mall is and how much real estate you're talking about, and, the kind of the conveniences or inconveniences that come with that, say relative to, I think of like where a Home Depot is, like you just mentioned, home improvement, or, or a Target or a Walmart or anything, and, kind of the strip center. Like, is that possible to do that? Or like, what's it going to take, or how many places across the country can that even happen across the mall real estate expanse?
Yeah. I mean, it's not just from a consumer's standpoint. It doesn't make sense for like you're not going to go to the Mall of America to get a steak or something like that. But we have these smaller regional malls. We have a lot of them across the U.S. And a lot of them are still hanging on, but they're kind of struggling. And a lot of them are going to be losing their department stores over the next year or two. And those are the kind of places that people do stop in to pick up stuff, because usually parking's easy and it's small enough that nothing's that far from one of the main entrances. And those are the kind of places, especially if you can configure it where you've got both an outdoor and indoor entrance to the mall, where I think it does make sense. I was just at a small regional, small market mall the other day that had an Ulta in it, and the whole time people are just coming and going, picking up stuff at the Ulta. So, I mean, it's definitely doable.
James, I'm curious. I kind of want to push a little bit on the mall part of it. And yes, there's the zoning complexities, but do you think that that's something that as municipalities kind of evolve, as the real footprints of maybe these more industrial spaces or the click and collect setups like you're talking about, do you think that there's a possibility that over the course of time that, the definitions of retail use could be altered by these municipalities in order to accommodate those malls as serving, maybe like as a warehouse pickup store or something to that effect?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, what is a store? It's kind of changing into this place where you might order online and go pick up there. What I don't think a lot of cities are going to do is say, hey, this spot that used to be retail, now we're going to put a big old, million square foot or 500,000 square foot warehouse distribution center. I don't think
Right.
that's going to happen.
You're not going to have 20 semis lined up on the back side of it, right? That's kind of the visual that we're thinking about here.
Yeah, but if it's something where, it's kind of small scale, it's click and collect, you're doing kind of local deliveries, I could see that happening. Yeah.
Is that something you're kind of more, I don't say in favor of, because that's probably not the right word, but are you more pro that type of approach? I mean, there's been quite a few people on social media that think the idea of even like micro warehousing or those types of fulfillment style operations that you're describing are just the worst thing that could ever happen to a mall and would drive the property values of the malls down in about, nanoseconds if they were attempted. Where do you come down on that? Do you agree with that side, or are you more, it's sounding like you're more like, yeah, that's something that actually should be explored?
I mean, it's all about highest and best use. I mean, if that little mall, especially I think about like kind of small regional malls that are just kind of sitting there underused or unused. I mean, I'd rather see activity there. I mean, that's going to increase the value, whatever the highest and best use is. Like if it was like a vibrant retail center that people were coming and going to all day and there were a few vacancies, then yeah, of course it would be dumb to do another use. But I mean, if it's lying fallow, let's put it to use. I mean, that's the whole point of real estate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A nice drop of the word fallow, by the way. Yeah. That's an Omni talk first. Very impressed. That was great.
Yes.
We'll ask you this then. So that's the department stores, right? But I think the other story inside this COVID enigma is the specialty side, right? And so there's all the small boxes inside the malls. Like what happens there? And where do you see that going? Because that can't all be turned into fulfillment either. And there's only so many restaurants you can put into a place. So like what do you foresee happening on that side of the landscape?
So overall, we need less of that kind of retail space.
Okay.
We have too much enclosed retail square footage in the US. We're overbuilt. And some of those, I think just over the next few years, we're going to see a lot of that shake out. And what's left, so if you're an inline tenant, some of these tenants are in real trouble and are going to go away. Some of them are saying, we don't want to be in an enclosed mall anymore. We want to be in an outdoor center. So they're shifting to that. And then there's the others that do just fine in enclosed malls, and those remain. And I do think there's new tenants that come in and fill up that space, and it can be, we've got a whole lot of digital natives out there that are experimenting with more and more physical space. So that's an opportunity. And then, a local, locally owned retailers as well. I think there's an opportunity for them to open up space. But to your point, there's going to be too much vacant inline space, I think, for all of the malls. But if you zoom in and just look at the Class A, like the mall that everybody goes to in your city, don't worry about them at all. They're fine.
There'll be enough kind of specialty retail to come in, whether it's new or old, they'll come in, churn, and just keep that thing moving. Yeah.
There's always demand for those. Those places, there's always a demand for space in malls like that.
James, one thing that, you point out as, one of the kind of hypotheses that you have for the future of retail and where things are headed is less overall selling space. And I'm curious, JLL has many retail properties. What are you seeing some of your tenants doing in terms of reimagining kind of the selling floor space, optimizing buildings for, curbside pickup or drive-through pickup or those kinds of things? What kind of evolutions are you really seeing in the structures and inside the boxes themselves?
Yeah, and it's really I think a handful of retailers that have taken the lead on carving out space for staging, for click and collect or buy online, pick up in store. Grocery stores have really, like for example, Kroger here in the US has really taken the lead in putting together a program of, buy online and then you pull up, they've got a special area for you to go. They bring it out to you. They've carved off space for those folks to stage. Target's doing that. I think everybody, you know, like all the Target, Walmart, Kroger, Best Buy is also doing that. There, a lot of these retailers leased relatively big boxes and have long-term leases and are saying, yeah, you know, we don't, you know, there's a few thousand square feet here that we could do without as far as retail floor space. And we might be better off using this for staging or even ship from store for click and collect.
Yeah, that's an interesting question too. And I never thought about that in terms of the dynamics here too, especially as you start talking open air malls versus say enclosed malls like we were talking about before. Like one question Anna always had is it feels like there's a little bit of a leadership vacuum there too. Like in terms of, we know what all the capabilities are from an omni-channel perspective. You just listed them: shipping from store, curbside pickup, concierge services, return servicing. And then you get into the discussion with the enclosed malls again, and it's a little bit of, well, chicken and the egg, who's going to start all that, right? Like is it the mall developer's responsibility to pull everyone together to think like that? We've seen, you know, companies like Centennial try to take that approach, you know, or is it, like you just said, the individual retailers just kind of picking themselves up by their own bootstraps and making it happen? Like, where do you see that? How do you see that playing out? Like who is going to lead that discussion, if anyone, or that implementation, I should say?
Yeah, it's funny. It kind of depends. A lot of the centers that we manage, we took the lead, and we don't own malls. We just manage them for other owners.
Okay.
But we've taken the lead in setting up staging areas for click and collect.
Okay.
Partnering with the retailers to say, okay, you know, you can send people to this certain area. We're going to set aside this area for people to, you know, either order stuff from you on the phone. And so I guess my point here is that as a shopping center manager or owner, you could do a certain amount.
Okay.
But it's really, in those cases where it's all existing, you can't really say, we're going to tomorrow set up a big concierge service. And, you know, now every tenant's going to have to pay us an extra X thousands of dollars a month for this. Like there's a lot that sort of has to be a little bit more premeditated. So I can see that for, well, it's already happening in like the Class A malls. You know, they have kind of banded together and have, you know, sort of either concierge, especially in the luxury wings of you know, like a Simon Mall or something like that. There's a concierge luxury shopper that's subsidized by those luxury tenants, like a personal shopper. There's special, I forget what they're called. Like if you're a VIP shopper, you can go hang out in these fun areas and get, I don't know, drinks and stuff.
Like your personal attaché or something.
Yeah. It doesn't make economic sense in a lot of malls.
Right.
Anyway, I guess my point is that for new developments, if you're developing with that in mind and you're structuring the leases with that in mind, then it's a lot easier to do. I think for existing centers, existing retailers, I think it's the retailers who are probably taking more of the lead on a lot of that.
I want to double click into that too, because I want to make sure I understand it. And are you saying that's just because there's just so much there contractually in terms of how the obligations are laid out across all the parties? Like it sounds like a big kind of ball of rubber bands that has to be almost unwound to some degree to make this happen. Like, is that what it is, or is there more to it than even that?
So, I think the biggest hurdle, and there are certain restrictions in leases that have to be overcome, but I think the biggest hurdle is around the money. Like it just costs money
Who's going to pay for what?
To set this stuff up.
Yeah.
And that really has to be integrated in the leases. And right now it's pretty much impossible to go back and get more money out of existing leases. If anything, people are negotiating rents downward right now.
And you got to do that one by one by one by one.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's a lot easier if you have a new development and you're just starting from scratch.
Totally.
James, what about retail rents are you seeing in the research that you've been doing lately? How are landlords getting creative? We know that there's all kinds of things that that are coming into play here in terms of like the lease and the contract that was put in place. But have you seen some, or in the management of the properties, have you seen more of a willingness to kind of work through, especially as you're bringing in more local retailers to fill some of those vacant spaces in the enclosed malls like you talked about? Are you seeing more flexibility in the lease structures for those?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you can get a better deal now because, owners are eager to fill space.
Yeah.
What's weird is it really depends on what kind of retail we're talking about. If it's a kind of space that's got a drive-through and makes good sense for like a fast food, like a QSR or something like that, you're not getting a deal because those are over demand right now than they were a year ago. But if we're talking about like a high street retail space, like in the city, Michigan Avenue in Chicago or Fifth Avenue or Soho in New York, for example, there's so few people in the city right now, no tourists really. I think there's an opportunity. If you wanted a lease space there, you could get a great deal. We're seeing so many fewer leases executed in those places, though, that I don't really have a visibility into what rents are going to be, because the asking rents, the face rents that landlords advertise really haven't come down yet.
Really?
And so we haven't had a negotiation for the market to figure out really what the new rents are going to be. Also, a lot of the vacancies that have been announced, those closures that have been announced, they haven't hit the market yet. Like they're still in the process of working all those out. So vacancy's up this year, but it's not high. It's not high enough yet to account for all those closures that are coming.
Got it.
Still with a ton of unknowns and variability too, in terms of what's going to play out.
For sure. And James, as you're kind of looking toward the future of where the industry is going, as we're headed into hopefully the end in sight of COVID, what is really exciting you, or what are clients that you're working with? What are they asking you for? What gets you most excited about where retail and real estate kind of intersect over the course of the next few months?
Wow. Well, I think it's funny. I think clients that I talk to have very similar questions to what you've been asking me, Anne. Like, you'd think they'd be the experts because they're living it every day, but they all have such just a narrow view of the world, and they're often kind of lacking that big picture. I mean, I think a lot of clients are very curious about when the city comes back. I guess I mentioned that before, is that where the struggle is right now is urban retail, because the office workers aren't there, the tourists aren't there, both domestic and international, the tourists aren't there. And the question is, when does the city make a comeback? And I've been saying, every time people have been saying, well, it's for the death of the city, everybody's moving to the suburbs. I'm like, that's insane.
Good. It's good to hear somebody say that. We totally agree.
Cities are the creative and economic engine of not our country, but our world, and it's just people aren't there because it's not safe. And as soon as it's safe enough, everybody's going to go back, and rents are going to be lower. So the young kids are going to flock to the cheap rents, and then rents are going to go back up again, and the cycle starts all over.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's a reason cities were cool. That doesn't just go away because of a virus. Yeah, right.
I live in the country because it's quiet, not because it's cool.
Right.
And I go to the city for all my culture.
To be cool, to pretend to be cool. At least that's what I do. On that note, like, I'm curious if you had to say, like, predictions wise. I mean, we're going into holiday. I'm curious, like, what's something listeners should bank on from your position of expertise for the holidays, and then maybe, what's something for 2021 that you'd say, hey, get ready for this? And maybe it was that last thing in terms of the cities are going to come back, but what would your answers be to that holiday and then to 2021?
So holiday is going to be the biggest question mark. I think the biggest questionable holiday not questionable, but just unknown that I think I've ever seen. And I've been doing this for over 20 years now. And we ran a consumer survey of over 1,000 consumers, and they reported, self-reported, mind you, that they're going to be on average spending about 20% less on holiday spending, which is a huge drop. So usually we'll see 2%, 3%, 4%, 5% increases year over year. And they're saying 20% less. I have not seen any forecasts that negative. Most of the forecasts I see are about like the 1% plus or minus, maybe 3%. My bet is that it's not going to be that bad. It may not even be negative. The big switch is going to be that everybody's going to be doing it online. I mean, not all of it, but a lot more of it than they've ever done before. We've seen such a huge shift to online shopping. I mean, the vast majority of shopping is still in store, but the penetration of online is higher than ever because of COVID. So as COVID leaves, I think some of that leaves. We'll probably go to a new plateau. What that is, I don't know. Maybe it's eventually 20% of all of retail is online.
Right.
But then again, online doesn't mean anything anymore because half the time I buy something online and then go pick it up at a store. So you have to have a store there.
Right.
So that's, the holidays are a big question mark. And then for next year, I'm excited about the spring and summer of next year. I do feel like a vaccine is rolled out at that point. And I do think that we kind of do return to some amount of normalcy. I was doing some reading about the Spanish flu, 1918 Spanish flu. And I was like, wait a minute, 1918, what came right after that? It was 1920. It was the Roaring 20s.
The Roaring 20s. Yeah, great point.
I mean, we're all going to be bootlegging flappers and having an awesome time. And maybe I'm exaggerating a little, but my point is that there's a lot of pent-up demand for having fun. And that's a good thing if you're in the food and entertainment business. That's a good thing if you have theaters. You just have to hold on through this kind of dark period.
Yeah, it's like Rhett Butler said in Gone with the Wind. There's a lot of money to be made in the crack up. You just have to have the fortitude to invest in the fact that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
You have me picturing Michael Jackson like going through stores on a spending spree. Like if you've ever seen those videos, that's what next summer is going to look like for all of America. I want this. I want that. I want that. That'll be great.
So this is a tangent, but that video, it was from a documentary years ago of Michael Jackson shopping and buying crazy, atrocious like
it was like in Vegas or something. Yeah, you see it. Yeah,
just pointing at things. Yeah,
it was at the Venetian shops in Vegas.
Yeah,
and one of the shops, I don't know if they're still doing it, but like 2 years ago when I was there last, one of the shops he shopped at, they had a video on a loop of him shopping, so you would know, oh, this is the place where Michael Jackson binge purchased all this weird stuff for Neverland Ranch.
The taxidermy tiger or whatever taxidermist. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know the right word to use there, but yeah, no, that's great. That video is classic. Yeah, so that's basically what's going to happen. We're all going to be like that in like 6 or 7 months, and until then, I think the other key point that you brought out there, it sounded like, was how much online volume can we get through that, or how much store volume can we get through the online funnel, so to speak, here over the next 3 months? I think that's still a big question, especially when traffic metering is in place in the stores too. I mean, you have to remember the denominator of the base for LY is so much bigger, but yet you've still got traffic metering in place. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out.
Well, and to James's earlier point too, I think you have people spending more though when they are going into those physical spaces too. So I think that
they're taking the risk.
It's not apples to apples quite exactly anymore, but
and stimulus and all that stuff too.
Yes. Well, James, thank you for joining us for this conversation. If people want to stay on top of the reports that you're working on, the research that you're doing, and if they want to listen to the Where We Buy a podcast, where can they find you?
All right. So a couple of plugs here. Wherever you listen to podcasts, just search for Where We Buy and hit subscribe, and conversations like this every week, but with people who are smarter than me. And On JLL.com, if you click on Insights, you can download our latest retail reports. And then if you are in the commercial real estate industry, we just launched a new podcast called Building Places. And that's just about the future of the built environment. So we cover all kinds of cool topics. Everything from, how can construction be more sustainable to how can the real estate industry be more diverse. So all kinds of cool topics, but all forward thinking and interesting and fun.
James Cook, the head of retail research for JLL. Thanks so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Chris.